We all heard all sorts of different urban legends all the time throughout our childhoods. However, every once in a while it turns out that one of those urban legends was true with the proof to back it up. Well, in today's video, we have a legend that wasn't only proven true, it was proven to have occurred many times. A guest of a hotel discovering a body under the bed of their room. This is an urban legend that I'm sure most of you out there heard back in the day at least once. A couple checks into a hotel room, everything seems nice, they're all ready for a good relaxing trip when suddenly they realize something stinks. Horribly. They all look around for the origin of the smell, but they just can't find anything, so they call up the front desk. They then send a maintenance worker up to see what's going on. After a while, the maintenance worker nails the smell down to coming from somewhere around the bed. Strange, he thinks, as he thought it might be something related to the pipes. But no, he lifts up a mattress to see nothing other than a decaying body rotting below the bed inside the frame. Then the couple has to grapple with the knowledge that they had been sleeping on that very bed for who knows how long, all while a rotting corpse lay just beneath them. Snopes.com has traced this urban legend back to a book called The Baby Train by Jan Harold Brunvand, in where he says that he first heard of the legend of the dead body under the hotel bed back in 1991. Every version he had heard had said that the incident took place in a Las Vegas hotel specifically. He couldn't find a case from Las Vegas, and there were very few other verifiable details. Given that this was before the internet could be used for something like this, he chalked it up to being nothing more than a simple tale and wrote it off. While some other urban legends may have been invented with no other purpose other than to creep out the audience, it seemed that this one was actually based on reality, intentional or not, as this has happened many times, some even before 1991. It seems that people likely mixed up the details or even combined them from a lot of news articles going around at the time. Hotel rooms don't even have beds with those little legs. Often they have a pedestal area, a big sort of box that goes down from the mattress box spring all the way to the floor that you can't actually get under or even look into. If someone were to hide something in there, it's likely that nobody would ever check unless something started to stink or leak out. And, well, that's how you get here. First, let's look into a few more recent cases where that very thing actually happened. Back in 2010, out in Memphis, Tennessee, a woman named Sony Millbrook was reported missing one evening in January when she never turned up to pick her kids up from school. Well, little did anyone know, Sony's ex-husband, Lakeith Moody, had been released from jail only a few days prior to her going missing. While Lakeith had a history of violence against Sony and had been court-ordered to stay away from her, it seems that she decided for one reason or another to meet up with him once again. They got a hotel room together, checking into room 222 at the Budget Lodge on East Brooks Road. At the same day Sony went missing, so did Lakeith. After a failure to pay for an extra day on the room, the hotel staff locked the door when it seemed that nobody was inside to prevent them from coming back and bumming another free day. They took Sony's belongings and put them in storage while housekeeping cleaned up. Little did they know, Sony's deceased body was shoved down into the box springs of that very bed as they cleaned the sheets. They didn't actually know anything for weeks. Over the next several weeks, 5 different guests stayed in that very room, sleeping in that bed, while nobody had any idea something was amiss. 47 whole days after Sony was reported missing, police officers were finally called out to the room. A hotel cleaning crew had finally come across her body within the bed and notified the authorities immediately. Given that this occurred shortly after Lakeith was released from prison, a person with a very clear danger to Sony, it wasn't long before the police came up with their first person of interest in the case. While Lakeith had been missing for just as long as she was, eventually the police were able to track him down in his car a couple of weeks later. Police were able to arrest him on an unrelated warrant, that of possession of a gun by a convicted felon. They had him in jail where they could easily question him. They came to find that Lakeith had been staying in the room with not only Sony, but their 4 kids as well when she went missing and he took off. After a long legal process, Lakeith Moody was ultimately arrested for the 2010 death of Sony Millbrook. It seems that he had strangled her and stuffed her into the metal bed pedestal while the kids were at school. He was sentenced to life in prison. Fast forward to 2016. This was when the police were called to room 323 of Hotel Senador in Mexico City. This was after a horrible smell started to emanate from the room about a week after a suspicious group of guests, a group of multiple people, had stayed there. The bed was lifted up by two cleaning ladies to see what might be causing the smell when they discovered the body, completely wrapped in a black garbage bag. Medics arrived on scene first, only to confirm that the woman was most obviously already deceased. All they could really tell about her was that she was most likely between 25 and 30 years old. A later autopsy showed that she had died from suffocation. Much like in the last case, a hotel spokesman came out to tell the public some horrifying information, saying, "During the time we believed that the woman was under the bed, several people checked into the room and slept with the body underneath the bed." The hotel staff said that they remembered someone checking into that room along with their male companion, but they failed to find any CCTV footage of either of them. As of this day, neither the victim or her male hotel guest have ever been identified. Out in Louisiana in July of 2019, the police got into an hour-long car chase with a man named Jamie Wingwood that ultimately ended up in a crash with the officers. When Jamie was taken in, he cryptically told the police to search a roadway inn off Highway 290 in Texas. The Austin police came out and searched the hotel, but they didn't find anything. After all, they weren't given many clues and had no idea which room he was even talking about, or if he was telling the truth at all. So they went out to Louisiana to interview Jamie directly. It seems that he was a little frustrated that they didn't find what he was telling them to look for. It didn't take long for him to confess to killing a woman, telling them that he had left her in room 219. After a few days, the Austin police were checking the room when they found, hidden in the hotel bed frame and unnoticed for days, the body of a woman. Despite housekeepers having entered the room multiple times and cleaned it, nothing was ever noticed that was off until this point. The body of 40-year-old San Juana Macias was found wrapped in a fitted bedsheet inside of the bed frame itself. The body showed obvious signs of head and facial trauma. As it turns out, Jamie and San Juana had been dating for about 3 years. According to San Juana's daughter, Jamie had threatened her one day before she ultimately went missing. This daughter said, "He basically told her on the 4th of July that he was going to, she had so many hours to live and that he was going to kill her." The same day that San Juana had went missing, Jamie's own sister called the police that she really believed he went through with killing her after she received one final shocking text message from him. The message said only, "I love you always. I'm fixing to be gone forever. I really fucked up this time. I'm leaving town. Right now." This was apparently what got the police to look for Jamie's car and end up in a chase with him in the first place. As of now, Jamie has been charged with aggravated assault and tampering with a corpse. Very recently, in 2023, a tourist was staying in a hotel in Tibet. This was a gorgeous, expensive hotel where you would expect nothing less but the classiest sort of room. When the tourist, who has only been called Zhang by the media, got into his room, he noticed that something smelled pretty bad. However, not doubting the hotel room, he wondered if something went bad in the bakery downstairs. Eventually, he came to the conclusion that the smell must be his own nasty feet and plopped down onto the bed to enjoy a nice sleep. Zhang stayed in this room for 2 nights before he asked to be moved to a different room. He had come to terms with the fact that the room itself stank and it wasn't going away. He was moved into a new room and all seemed well, until the police came to his door. They summoned him back to his original room to have a talk with him. Little did he know, he was getting caught up in a murder investigation. Zhang was informed that the previous smell was coming from a dead body underneath his bed, the very bed he slept on top of for 2 days. Zhang told the media, "I asked them what happened and they told me someone had died, so I asked them where. They said under my bed." The police attempted to calm Zhang down by telling him that he wasn't a suspect in the case as the body had evidently been there since a few days before his arrival. While he was glad to hear that he wasn't a suspect, it didn't really do anything to ease the disgusting feeling that he had been sleeping right on top of a corpse for days. As soon as Zhang told the police what they needed to know, he packed up and left Tibet immediately. Needless to say, that trip was ruined. Ever since, he has struggled to sleep, telling the news, "I stay up until 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. every morning and the slightest movement would wake me up. It left me in a bad mental state." By the time Zhang was heading back home, the police had already arrested someone for the murder who was on a train out of the city. Zhang only decided to come forward about his experience because the hotel had initially denied the whole story ever happened. In anger, he decided to post an inflammatory review of his experience online. It quickly went viral and spread all over social media in China. Soon after, mainstream media took advantage of the virality and began publishing videos of the suspect's arrest about 2,000 kilometers from the scene of the crime. Zhang is still very disturbed by the whole ordeal. Now, there are plenty of other stories out there along these lines, stories that are a bit older and don't have too much information about them but are still interesting nevertheless. So let's take a dive into those cases as well. Possibly the oldest body under the bed story dates all the way back to 1982. Three men, Daniel Deppner, Richard Kuklinski, and Gary Smith, were a small team of criminals that would often run auto theft scams. One night, Daniel and Richard decided to lighten the load a little bit and get rid of Gary. They did so by feeding him a cheeseburger laced with cyanide at their hotel room in North Bergen, New Jersey. Once the two came to realize that the poison wasn't working, at least not quickly, they dropped that tactic and Richard strangled Gary after deciding that the whole dying from poison thing was taking too long. The two men shoved his body under the bed and fled the scene. Over the next 4 nights, the room was rented out by 4 different people. All had complained about a weird smell, but none of them could find the cause. That was until the body was found on the 4th night. Richard had felt that Daniel also knew too much and later killed him as well. Richard later ended up getting caught and hit with a life sentence. While all of these stories have been odd, this one is odd in the sense that a murder wasn't even involved. In this story, a man checked into his hotel room in Rosedale, Maryland in 1987. Well, this guy was a bit adventurous, as you could say, as he decided to gulp down 34 balloons of heroin. Well, anytime you swallow a balloon like this, you risk the chance that it might burst. Well, he decided to up his chances to the 34th power that day. He lost the gamble and died then and there. His girlfriend panicked and shoved him into the box spring of the bed, fleeing from the motel. 3 days later, hotel guests complained of the smell, and that led to the discovery. Here's a story from Long Island that took place back in 1988. In this, Mary de Oliveira was the victim of her boyfriend, Cornelius Walls, when he struck her over the head and killed her. In the end, Cornelius ended up stuffing her into the bed frame and fleeing the scene. Several days later, after hotel guests complained of the smell while sleeping on their bed, her body was found. Luckily, a third guest of the party refused to stay in that room because of the smell and saved themselves some horror. After a manhunt, Cornelius was caught in Garden City in his car. It's lucky that the police caught him when they did, as he was holding a 26-year-old woman captive in the back seat. He had repeatedly forced himself on her for the last 3 days since kidnapping her and was likely on his way to kill her. Cornelius shortly ended up back in prison. Sadly enough, this came after he was actually released after another murder that had occurred back in the 1950s. Since then, he had been arrested numerous times for charges related to assault, but still he was out there kidnapping and abusing women with the police none the wiser. 1 year later, in 1989 out in Virginia, a man named Jerry Lee Dunbar had killed 2 different victims and hidden their bodies in this manner. One was 27-year-old Deidre Smith and the other was 29-year-old Marilyn Graham. One was found in a motel off Route 1, and the other was found under the bed in the Alexandria Econo Lodge. In the first case, he did end up moving the body into a small compartment under the carpet after keeping her under the bed for a few days. He then stayed in that hotel room for 3 more weeks himself, seemingly unbothered. Both bodies weren't found until later guests noticed the smells and complained, leading to their discoveries and police intervention. Jerry was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. He was recently given a parole hearing, but it wasn't granted. In March of 1994, the body of a 24-year-old woman named Josefina Martinez was found in this manner under the bed at the Travelers Hotel near the Miami International Airport. This was after an angry German tourist had to complain numerous times about the insufferable smell in the room. The police came to suspect a burglar that she had been dating as the primary suspect in her murder. But given that the police didn't release a name of this suspect, it's hard to follow through on whether or not he was ever caught or arrested. German tourists apparently had it pretty rough that year. Again in 1994, a few German tourists in Fort Lauderdale complained of the smell in their room, leading to the discovery of 47-year-old Brian Gregory's body under the bed. It seems that the staff themselves had even noticed a smell in this case, but they had chosen not to look into it until someone filed a complaint. In 1999, the remains of a 64-year-old man named Saul Hernandez were found inside the bed frame of room 112 at the Burgundy Motor Inn in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And, you guessed it, a couple of German tourists had spent the night in the room, unbeknownst sleeping right above his corpse. It wasn't until the next morning that they decided to complain and hotel staff discovered the body. Apparently in this case, a 17-year-old girl was arrested and charged in the murder. The details are pretty unclear as to what happened given her juvenile status. I mean, the police weren't really willing to say much. All we know is that she had gotten into a fight with him, stabbed him multiple times, and fled back to Brooklyn where she lived and was eventually caught. Now we have a case from good old Missouri that took place in 2003. In July that year, a guest had checked into the Capri Hotel near downtown Kansas City, where I've actually stayed before as a kid, and began to complain about the smell in his room. The managers basically told him to go to hell and that they weren't going to do anything. The guy toughed it out for 3 more days before finally giving up and leaving because he couldn't stand the stench any longer. The cleaning staff later came in after he left to tidy up the room where they quickly found the body themselves. They called the police and they pulled out the body, shoved into the box spring and covered up by wooden panels. The guest had only been inches from the body the entire time. Kansas City wasn't really happy with the heat that they got for this case. It was the straw that broke the camel's back for the Capri Hotel. That place had been called a, quote, magnet for crime for quite some time by that point. 1 year after this incident, the hotel was torn down in disgust. So, long story short, not only is this urban legend very true, but it seems to happen all the time. But, don't let it get to you too much. One case recorded every few years across the entire planet isn't really that much when you consider how many hotel rooms there are in the world. But it does go to show you that you never really know how much truth there was to those random playground rumors that you always used to hear. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found the content interesting, please give it a like as it really helps me out in the algorithm, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Recently, I've been uploading all of these videos to podcast platforms as well, so feel free to check out Spotify or any of your preferred apps and give it a listen. If you don't mind, go ahead and follow me on social media, as if anything were to ever happen to this channel again, that would probably be the only way you'd ever hear about it. I always appreciate when people sign up for my Patreon as well. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored, link in the description. Channel memberships are back up too, where you can get all the same benefits as well. So, once again, this has been your host Kyle, thank you, and good night.